Totally agree. I think one thing that they knocked out of the park so much back in the day is they were so focused on creating a really good game and then just moving on right afterwards. And I think that's something that's gotten lost a lot nowadays. Like, people create an amazing game and then they want to create DLC, and then they want to create like multiplayer, and then they want to add, like, just add, and they're like always working on this one game for 10 years. And I guess just single player games in general have just changed over time, but like that was something I really narrow down to is a huge reason why those games were successful, because you had like Final Fantasy 6, an amazing game, and then like a few years later Final Fantasy 7, an amazing game, and then Final Fantasy 8 and Final Fantasy 9, and there was never a like, yo, Final Fantasy 7 was pretty good, maybe we should have a 7 part 2, or you know, a 7 part 3, or 7, like there was none of that. It was just like, we made a good game, but it's in the past, time to move on to 8, time to move on to 9, and kind of keep pushing forward. And I mean, they kind of did add a little bit to 7 as years went on with prequels.
Just a little bit.
Right. And now remake and everything.
Extra stuff that they tacked onto that series.
It's crazy.
Over time.
It's crazy to think like 7, 8, and 9 all came out within what, like a 3-year period. That's crazy.
I was just about to say, the development cycle between each of those amazing games was a year.
Right.
And that's unheard of. That's impossible now. So in a way, I can see that a lot of value for game companies now is giving a game as long a lifespan as possible. And maybe that's through DLC, maybe that's through sequels or something. But there was something just about having a complete game done, story, nothing to be fixed with patches later, nothing to be enhanced upon. It was just this wonderful thing that is complete and it's yours.
Yes.
And I kind of miss that. I do.
Yeah, there's something beautiful about just releasing a game that's just the way it is, you know, bugs and glitches, and you got to get it as close to 100% as possible and to the release date. So yeah, worse nowadays, it's not uncommon for developers to release games that are kind of broken in a sense. I mean, like the small game nobody's heard of called Cyberpunk.
I'm not really sure about, I've heard about that one.
Right, but that is really frustrating. Like, companies can just kind of put out a half-assed game a lot of times now and then just fix it slowly over time with patches. And I don't know if it's because investors are pushing the game out because they want to get their money back. I'm sure that's maybe a piece of it, or maybe deadlines and people thought like they bit off more than they could chew, essentially. Like, there's this grand amazing world and it's gonna take, you know, a decade to make, but we have to release it in 5 years kind of thing. So I don't know. I feel like people get so caught up in these huge open world games, and while they're amazing, they are they can kind of be a problem in and of themselves, you know?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I don't want to trivialize it whatsoever. Making a game like games today is a monumental task. So
yes.
Making everything perfect compared to what it probably was like back in the day is going to be tough. But you can clearly see where there's been rush or cut corners or almost inexcusable kind of, they knew it was broken. Like, yes. They knew it wasn't right. But they, for some reason, I don't know, maybe they needed to make the money back immediately. Maybe there was some sort of financial reason or investor reason that they had to. But they have the goal just to put it out there, receive the backlash, and then promise to fix it later.
It's this weird, it's this weird thing because like games nowadays, I've talked about this in the past, like games nowadays are not, you know, like games they were 20, 30 years ago. Games nowadays have hundreds of millions of dollars. A lot of these AAA titles have hundreds of millions of dollars behind them, in investors looking to recoup money. It's such a money thing. And when you tie in the art aspect of it, it's just all these talking heads like trying to come together to create this piece of art. And it really does blow my mind that some game companies can still put out just such incredible stories that are so artistic, like stuff like God of War or The Last of Us. Like, Naughty Dog is I always feel like Naughty Dog is kind of in a league all their own compared to literally everybody else, because they just have the sense like, we're going to create an amazing game in so many different ways and so many different configurations, and we're not going to let investors push us to push it out at a particular time. Like, I'm sure they have like a deadline and like, we have to get it out by this time. The problem with all of that being said, though, is this idea of like video game crunch time and pushing developers to work, 50, 60, 70 hours a week to get these games done in this time period. So it's weird. It's combining art and money to such a high degree, and not like a couple $100. Like, these are hundreds of millions of dollars of money a lot of times. So it's a weird situation to be in, I feel like.
Yeah, it might be easy enough to on the outside to look at this situation and be like, oh, why don't they just XYZ? But there's so much going on behind every game these days that it's really hard to discern. Crunch is it sucks, and you would hope that nobody has to go through it. I don't know. I don't want to say that maybe it's necessary in certain cases, but I really don't know what could be happening back then that it's like it's make or break maybe for some of these guys. So I don't know. That I think nowadays people are so aware of crunch and how strenuous it is to work in the video game industry that I see it commonly said across the internet now that it's okay, take your time, delay the game, it's all right, you can delay it. Like, a lot of people are just very open about make it good on its first release, don't worry about it, we'll get you when you're ready. But again, who knows what the deciding factors are within the company itself. Right,
because like I'm sure most people nowadays would say that if a game is being pushed too hard on developers or pushed too hard to meet a scheduled deadline, a lot of people nowadays seem to be like, it's fine, delay it 6 months, delay it a year, like it's fine, we'll get it. But then you also have to wonder how much is like investor pressure out there pushing them to release it, because they're like, I don't care that everybody's gonna wait for it, I need my money now, you need to make my money now, kind of thing. So
exactly
it kind of does frustrate me a little bit when some people talk about video games being too expensive even nowadays at $70. Like, I've always personally I've always thought video games were so undervalued in a sense, like, because you can go to a movie theater for a 2-hour 3-hour show and pay $20 for a ticket, whereas a video game you can pay $70 for a game and get 30, 50, 100 hours, endless replays of it nonstop, with so much stuff maybe being added through DLCs. So many things just are in the game for you to explore, and for $70 I've always thought that was pretty good value. And I mean, that doesn't even take into account getting it on sale. Like, sometimes these $70 games that have these hundreds of millions of dollars of budgets behind them, or tens of millions of dollars, you can get them for $20 on a sale sometimes. So yeah, I feel like I feel like for a lot of games,
I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're good. But I feel like for a lot of these games, the scope and the amount of budget behind them that are put into them doesn't quite equal out to the end cost,
Yeah, there was always the talk about, because video games have been in America at least, right, $60 for the longest time. The world has changed so much since that initial price point was set. Actually, wasn't there a point where it used to be 50 and then they moved it up to 60 and everyone freaked out in a similar way?
Yeah, I think it was PlayStation
like,
2 games
this is what
were
game
50.
Companies need.
Right, I think PS2 games were 50 and then PS3 was 60 if I can recall, and now PS5 is 70. But that's also not even counting into fact inflation. Like, if you
inflation, exactly.
Right, if you count inflation in there, it's $70 is probably the same as $50, 20 years ago, if not even less, maybe. Sorry, what were you saying?
We're spoiled. That's what it boils down to.
Right.
We're so spoiled.
It almost makes me feel
we're getting
good.
These amazing lifetime kind of games, and I don't know. This game that costs as much as a pretty big meal that I'm gonna treat myself to later in the week.
Right.
That's too expensive.
Isn't it so fascinating how humans can put values on certain things differently and be fine spending money on one thing. But like one that's always fascinated me is people spending money on applications on their phone. Like everybody always gravitates towards the free app, even if the premium one that you use every single day for work or whatever, like something, an app you use all the time, if it's $2 for the premium version for one-time purchase, people won't want to spend money for it as they're driving off the Starbucks, you know, drive-through with their $8 mocha frappuccino caramel thingy.
Exactly. All these small costs that are just like, I'll treat myself to this. It builds up. It's a huge amount of money in some cases.
Right.
Like, all right, we're not gonna pay a little bit extra for this game that took years to create and is
it's
just yeah.
It's fascinating. Humans are so fascinating. I always just love thinking about like little conundrums like that of why people will spend money so eagerly on or like getting coffee every single day or going out to eat all the time or just anywhere these dollars just seem to flow out of people's income here and there. But then stuff that's like something they're going to get a lot of value from, something like maybe a video game they're going to spend a lot of time on, maybe an application that's going to help them get work done better. Some people are hesitant with spending money on that. I guess it's just all priorities where people's money go, right?
Exactly. A lot of it goes to that immediate, quick gratification, that spur of the moment. Yeah, this will be good.
Right.
But they just look at things in different ways, yeah.
Have you noticed the whole industry, it seems like with video games, is kind of changing too, in the sense where so many games now are becoming like gotcha kind of games where they have like loot boxes in there or they have like stuff hidden away behind a paywall. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Not a big fan of gambling, of gotcha, of loot boxes. I think it's just a way for people to spend more money in that vain hope of getting the thing that they actually want instead of being able to just get the thing they actually want. I'm not massive about it. Not a big fan of paywalls either. This isn't to say that I'm anti like DLC or anything like that. Like absolutely not. But it kind of falls into that pocket. I had a discussion with about this with someone recently, where if the content is made after the base game is done and it's to give it some more life and it's to for the players or whatever, then I'm happy to drop some money on that. But if it's something that was intentionally left out of the final product, or it was something that they were creating at the time with the intention of just like making it a cash grab, I'm not down with that. But so that's kind of where I draw the line for most of my DLC purchases after the fact.
I wonder how many of those are created with that notion like in the forefront. Like they're looking at their game, they're creating particular maybe a section of the game and they're like, you know what if we cut this just for DLC? I wonder, it would be fascinating to talk to a game developer and ask how often that happens. Or maybe they're like fully created the game, everything's done, and they're like, okay, we're going to slice this part off over here and that's going to be DLC that we're going to charge $20 for. Or if it is where a lot of developers will fully create their game, they release it, get some good reception, people like it, and they're like, okay, maybe we could add something more over here, and then they begin development on it. That would be fascinating to talk about.
I think that would really be a case-by-case basis. I'm convinced that both of those situations definitely happen. But it would be so interesting to see, like, with which games has that occurred, with which studios, with and why.